This is an interview for peep-Magazine. We're joined with filmmaker, musician, educator, Mr. Robert Jefferson. Robert Jefferson.
Hello there.
Did you kill Laura Palmer?
I do remember right back in 1991 or whatever, that my dad made us a T-shirt that said "I killed Laura Palmer" on it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, what do you think of that? 1990. That I used to wear proudly, looking like a right geek.
For the people who don't know, me and Robert Jefferson will go way back because Robert was actually my lecturer at Northumbria University and kind of paved my way and inspired me to go on my own journey and go on my own path as a content creator. So I want to thank.
That's where it led to.
I want to thank you, Robert. Look at the monster you've created.
I know
I want to thank you for kind of teaching us all I know, or taking me brain out, as you say, washing it a bit and putting it back in.
Well, that was a lot of fun manipulating your brain.
Yeah, thanks.
I enjoyed it greatly.
Oh, thanks a lot. And
again, still one of the best student films I've ever seen was a film called Whitehouse Road.
Oh yes.
By Mr. Clifton.
Oh, thanks, Robert.
It's still one of my favourite films. Actually.
Oh, really?
It was great. Oh yes, yeah. I remember it. I remember every part of it. It was burned into my brain.
Oh wow!
I came to this country in 1940. Said your grandfather.
Yes.
Amazing. I remember every little minute detail of it. It was a fantastic film.
Oh,
put in the context of history, but a great character study as well. Really enjoyed it.
Hi, thanks a lot. I interviewed Noel McLaughlin late last year, I think it was, mid last year, and he gave us quite a lot of praise for Whitehouse Road. So thanks, Robert, and thanks, Noel.
That's what films do. You see, films stay in your heart, don't they?
You started your career as a scene painter and prop maker.
Yes.
In theatre and TV. Could you maybe explain that, Rob, where you were doing prop making and where you were scene painting?
Yeah, it's interesting because I started doing that. It was at Newcastle College with one of the kind of local legends of the region, a man called Mike Myers.
Yeah.
Not Mike Myers from Halloween. Not Mike Myers from Austin Powers, but another Mike Myers. Who made props and was a designer maker as well. And we're kind of my wife and I actually worked together painting for theatre and a bit of television as well. Also did things like entertainment venues and pubs and things like that, scene painting them, all sorts of things. Anywhere that needed decorative paint techniques.
Around basically. The northeast?
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely.
And then did you do some work on the Spender series?
Yes, yeah, that was. I don't suppose many people remember that, but it was a big show in the early '90s. Jimmy Nail show. Did some painting on that. We painted the police station and Spender's flat, things like that. That was fascinating. I suppose one of the first peeks behind the curtain, I guess, of film and TV. Working as a painter, actually, doing things like trying to distress a garage door to make it look like it was burned.
Yeah.
Or turning what was basically a derelict, dilapidated loft in Newcastle into a swanky, dead tech, postmodern hangout for a super cool detective like spender.
Yeah.
So, sitting in what was basically a place that hardly had a roof in it, 90% pigeon guano, actually turned this place into something that looks like it's the coolest hangout in the world, in 1993.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I quite like
it. It's interesting to see, these things, that the magic, I suppose, it's the magic of television.
Oh, of course. Your love for drawing, performing, filmmaking, and music, because I didn't know you were an accomplished musician, you see, because I just didn't know that, because all I kind of known you for was animation, an animator, yes. Course leader, and then when I was when you said that you were making music and you had done all this work for other people and albums and films, I was quite shocked. So encapsulating all these skills that you've got, Rob, like animation, filmmaking, music, prop making, was this kind of developing your skills and your outlook as an auteur?
I suppose you could say that. I guess it's. I suppose it goes back to just the love of animation. I got into doing animation because precisely those things. I like to draw pictures. I like to tell stories. I like to make sounds and music, and I was a bit of an outsider as well. So I wasn't really part of a scene or anything like that. I kind of kept myself to myself, still do. Hermit.
Best way sometimes.
And animation was the perfect kind of vehicle for somebody who liked to do that. You drew pictures, you drew storyboards, you drew your own puppets and things like that, out of your mind. And then an animation film has no sound. You don't record sound when you make an animation, of course, as you know. You have to create it from scratch. So you create the soundtracks yourself, usually, because you're working in an independent filmmaking context with very little money, almost like a cottage industry, really.
Yeah.
And you make all the soundscapes, you design the sound, you make you create a sound effect or something like that.
The diegetic sound, Rob?
Yes, I always get them mixed up. I always have to double check somewhere as an educator. But yeah, you've got to create the sounds that emanate from that world of animation from scratch. So the sound of a door creaking, or the wind blowing or whatever. So it forces you to become a sound designer if you're doing the sound for animation. And I've always been of the school that sound design and music go hand in hand. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That they kind of mix into one thing. That the score or the musical score can become part of the sound design. A film like Blade Runner, for instance, has got. It's a good example of the music actually kind of turns into the sound design as well at points. You don't know where one ends and the other begins.
Yeah, of course.
You've got a synth wash kind of becomes part of the sound of a spinner going up across the LA landscape or whatever. Or the sound of a fan and a computer burble appears in an office. And you don't know what is music and what is sound design. And sometimes it's very clear to see the difference. Other times they kind of merge into each other, which I think is fascinating. And of course, I also made the music for my animation films myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons for that is, of course, is to save money as well. Think about one of the great film music composers who was also a film director, John Carpenter,
Oh, absolutely love John Carpenter.
Think about him in the early 70s or whatever, having no money for musical combos to play the soundtracks, and instead finding using synthesizers with his music making friends and things like that to create a expansive and electronic soundscape, things like that. So, yeah, that's kind of where it came from. And when I became the program leader of the film course that you were referencing, that you were on, that took a lot of time up, and it probably meant that making animation films was a little bit harder, whereas making music's a little bit easier, perhaps, sometimes. And so quite often I would do a bit of music for my filmmaking colleagues and things like that. In particular, I made music with probably the longest association is with Ian Cottage, who is a local filmmaker, and I did some music for his feature film that he made in Spain called Bosque, which he made a few years ago now. Very small scale, low key drama set in Spain. Did the music for that, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. Would some of your influences be? I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but Jan Schwangsmeyer? Considered probably one of the world's greatest animators, with dimensions of dialogue, Jabberwocky, dimensions of dialogue. I'm sure I've seen. Is that the one with the two heads and the talking, and the two heads consume each other, and then they kind of beat each other up?
I probably bored you stiff with Jan Schwankmeyer.
See, it's all
when you were on the course.
It's all stuck.
Probably showing you everything I could find. Schwankmeyer was a Czech filmmaker. He's still alive. I think he's probably about 90 now. I think. If he's died in the last few years, I'd be very upset. But I think he's still going. Yes, he would call himself. He's probably classed as like a surrealist filmmaker. And I don't think strangely, I don't think he classes himself as an animator. I think he calls himself a filmmaker. And he just so happens to use animation because of the fantastical aspects of it, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And quite often, of course, the animation parts of those films will be animated by other people. But yeah, a very distinctive filmmaker with influence on lots of people, actually. Terry Gilliam, David Lynch, the brothers Quay. All of these people are amazed by the creativity of somebody like Schwankmeyer.
Len Lai?
The interesting thing is that actually a lot of these things like Schwankmeyer and the brothers Quay, Twin Peaks, all these kind of things were quite easy to get hold of, like in the early 90s, for instance, thanks to Channel 4, Yeah. The Formations show, for instance, used to showcase stuff from around the world. It's one of the reasons why I got into animation and was interested in it. So that's kind of where you saw this stuff.
Yeah.
Originally.
Cool.
But yes, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, going slightly back to your animations and your music, because you screened at international film festivals, Ottawa,
yeah,
which is a renowned music festival, and is it Annecy?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
yeah,
and that was
the kind of films that I made in the 90s and 2010s were kind of like festival films, really. There were independent films funded by local arts boards. In our case, in Northern Arts, as it was, Northern Production Fund, as it was called then.
Yeah.
And also partly by the university as well, of course. And the film's main way to be seen was to be exhibited in these bespoke film festivals, animation festivals. You get all kinds of different film festivals, animation festivals, etc. But there were lots of different ones, including places like Ottawa or Annecy, which is in France. And these are kind of like showcases, business exhibitions and things. And even things like the Edinburgh Film Festival as well was a really important one at the time as well. So you'd screen a film there, and sometimes get picked up by distributors and broadcast here and there around the world, which was always great, but it wasn't a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a hard slog, isn't it?
But it was good to kind of, get things in programs with other people, have retrospectives, all that kind of stuff. It's just about kind of like, it raises your profile as a filmmaker, gives you the opportunity to make more films, etc., etc.
Yeah, of course.
That, really.
Because your kind of process was like cutout style, traditional, hand drawn. Was there any like rotoscope in there, Robert, or were you mainly cut out illustration?
That's exactly, you're right. It was traditional hand drawn cutout animation, a bit like having a 2-dimensional, flat marionette, really.
Yeah.
Strangely, I remember when I was at school, and the old careers advisor used to come in, and they used to say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" as it were.
I don't want to grow up.
More than often, I would say, "Eh? Yeah, I don't want to grow up." But what I used to say? I used to say, "I want to be a puppeteer."
Yeah. Did he say it?
Nah.
Yeah.
No, you won't be a puppeteer. You're not going to be a puppeteer.
I hear this all the time from careers advisors. Oh.
I know. You said I want to host podcasts and have an award-winning magazine about northeastern subcultures.
Oh yes.
And they went,
no, that'll never happen.
Never happened. But there you go. So, in essence, bizarrely, I kind of did become a puppeteer in the end, because part of the thing that I was most interested in when I was making the animation films was probably performance, and getting a good kind of puppet performance out of me characters that I used to make.
Yeah.
Frame by frame, underneath the rostrum camera, the camera that used to look down on the rostrum bed, where all the artwork was, lit by little spotlights, inky dink cameras, lights as they were called, and you'd create a little performance underneath the lights, and it was a kind of slow motion puppetry, really, I think. And I've always still been interested in the way kind of like characters move on screen and things like that. There you go.
I kind of always remember you saying that when I used to use light for my work wasn't really traditional animation. It was a lot of rotoscope, and when I was trying different things, I always remember you saying, when you get the light in, mold the subject with the light, and I had never heard that before. Like, you've got to mold the subject with the light, and it's creating, because an image, or as you know this yourself, Rob, that an image can look quite flat until you start bringing light in, and then you start molding that light, you see, and it's all these little things that I picked up and took off you and Noel as well, and then if I remember correctly, when you were teaching us at Northumbria Uni, you were working on, was it an animation called Scuttlebutts?
No, that was the film I made I made that in the 90s. One of my first films, that one.
I was right in the name though.
Yeah, the name's
the name's right. The date's wrong.
It was called Scuttlebutt Coffin.
Scuttlebutt Coffin, yes.
Coffin, yes. It was a man trapped inside a barrel. Yeah.
And it was kind of hillbillies, kind of out back, trying to. I don't know if that's the correct terminology.
No, I'd say so. But I like the sound of that. Let's just say it was.
It was kind of like that, and then
it was about that film was about an escapologist, but
right.
trying to get out of a barrel that he'd been put in and put underwater. I always quite like kind of the carnivalesque sort of storylines. No, I was probably no, I wasn't working on that one right when I was teaching you. I don't think.
Right.
I was busy teaching you.
You were too busy teaching me. That was an absolute full-time job.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Rob, is that...
I was only interested... Go on, sorry.
Incidentally, is that Max Headroom in the background?
Yes, it's more like it's more like the Max Headroom Signal Intrusion mask.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, you know the Max Headroom Signal Intrusion, don't you?
No, I don't.
Oh, you like this if you like strange things. About 1987, there was I'm always interested in signal intrusions, which is when somebody hijacks.
I know exactly what you're going to talk about. I know exactly what you're going to say, because as soon as I looked at it, Robert, I was like, do you know what it is? It looks like that video when
Yeah.
And what was there a can of Coca-Cola involved?
I believe it was. You were very close. I think it was Pepsi.
Pepsi, sorry.
Yeah, because I think Max Headroom was in a Pepsi advert. Oh, was it? Oh, it might have been Coca-Cola. You might be right.
And there was someone bending over, and he was kind of like slapping the girl's bum or something. He was doing something like that, wasn't he? He was on for ages.
Yeah, it was. Somebody hijacked the television signal.
That's right.
Actually,
yes.
During I think one of them was during an episode of Doctor Who in the US, and all of a sudden this guy came on dressed up as Max Headroom.
Yeah.
And did all this sort of ribald humour, anarchic humour for a few minutes. People don't know exactly what he was saying, but he was basically making fun of the corporate world and how the character, the very popular MTV character at the time, Max Headroom, who some people might remember, a supposedly computer-generated chat show host, who was, of course, really just done with makeup and graphic effects rather than computer wizardry. But he was using that. They used that as a kind of a satirical interruption to the normal schedule. And I don't think anybody's ever found out who did it, actually.
No,
but I always love it when somebody kind of anarchically breaks through the edges of normality like that. There's another one, I think, where somebody trying to pretending that they were it was an alien message as well. That's another one.
Captain Midnight.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
It was
yeah, they're all on the internet, I think.
Captain Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
He infiltrated a broadcast of what the hell was it? It was something like the Incredible Hulk or something along those lines, and then he was absolutely disgraced because was it HBO had put the price up on the cable or something?
I don't know, but I know that there were lovely little sort of like anarchic pranks that were playing on the establishment.
I love them. I love them. I mean, how they can infiltrate like a massive organisation.
I know. Well, I think again, we're no experts on this, but I think the Max Headroom one was quite a simple kind of interruption that they could get hold. They had their own kind of like antenna, and they could just put it on the top of a building next to the original antenna and override a signal or something as simple as that. Of course. You just needed it was almost like it was just a superannuated CB signal or something like that. You know that they could. They could take control of it for 5 minutes or whatever before it was overridden.
Oh, that's amazing, isn't it?
Or they changed the frequency. Fascinating stuff.
I
think it's interesting.
It's absolutely great, it is. And it's great that us are actually talking about it, like 40, 50 years down the line or something.
I know, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's just
we've grown on for it'd be about 33 years or something like that since that happened.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. But that of course, that isn't the mask that was used in the signal intrusion. No. I made that out of papier-mâché.
It looks ominously like the exact same mask, but We'll just
I was
leave that
actually
there.
amazed. I know. Well, I tried to make it look like the mask from that intrusion because I was going to make a little film about it actually.
Ah, right.
So I was thinking of making. It's like loads of ideas float around about films and things like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that was a one that's sitting there somewhere. Maybe do something with it one day.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you need a hand with anything, Robert, you know where I am.
We'll make a film about the Max Headroom signal intrusion
And Captain Midnight.
Yeah. See what happened behind the scenes. How it actually happened.
What happened just before they done it, or a day in the life.
Yeah.
So
day in the life of the Max Headroom signal intrusionists.
Intrusionists.
That's a title.
So that
Intrusionists. That's quite good.
The Intrusionists.
Yeah.
Part 1.
It's nice, isn't it?
Part 1, Part 2.
That sounds good. That's pretty good.
With me talking about the cauldron was. Oh no, I didn't mention the cauldron because there was another film. There was another film you were working on when I was at university, and it was with David Soul.
Oh yes, that probably was around about your time, wasn't it? Yeah.
And for the people who don't know David Soul, he was. I'm just going to give you the audience a quick update because some people might not know who he is, but he played a storm role in Salem's Lot, which absolutely terrified me. That film, it's so low key film. Whoa, what's that?
I won a Salem's Lot T-shirt today.
Wow,
isn't that weird?
How weird is that?
Salem's Lot. Look at that.
Oh right, was that his shop? Antiques.
That's the shop. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
how strange is that?
In Barlow.
How weird.
Straker in Barlow.
Because
Salem's Lot was
absolutely
amazing.
fantastic, wasn't it?
One of the best TV movies of all time.
That's what I was trying to get at, like a TV movie, and I mean equally as terrifying. But I'll tell you the bits. I'll just get this out of the way. When there's a few bits that really stick in my head with that film. The bit where the woman takes him into the house and she kind of seconded him in the bedroom, just like lying on the bed, and he's like not interested. Yeah, he's just not interested, and he's looking through the curtains, and he's like, yeah, he's trying to find that guy with the antique store, and he's like, is the antique store like around here? And she was like, she's lying on the bed, all like provocative, and he's just not cared. No, he's not interested. He's just fully focused on this antique store, but and then not many people know he was the cop in Dirty Harry's Deadpool.
He was in the second Dirty Harry film called Magnum Force.
Oh, was it? Oh, I thought it was Deadpool.
No, it was Magnum Force. Yeah.
Oh,
which
right.
Possibly is the best Dirty Harry film.
Yeah. Is that the one?
Agree.
Is that the one with the Guns N' Roses theme tune now?
No, I don't think so.
I'm still thinking of Deadpool.
It's a beautiful. The music is Lalo Schifrin, who did Bullet and Mission Impossible.
Classic. Yeah.
Lalo Schifrin did the music for Magnum Force. I nearly sang it for you there. I'm not going to sing it.
Oh, that's fine.
But no, Magnum Force is the second Dirty Harry film. Clint Eastwood.
Right.
David Soul.
And David Soul was the cop.
And David Soul was
and obviously Starsky and Hutch
was one of the bad motorcycle cops. Without those evil motorcycle cops in Magnum Force, I don't think there'd be a T-1000 in Terminator 2. But anyway, let's not get too.
Yeah.
Let's not go to the Matrix too much right now. But yes, Cliff, you were explaining to your audience who David Soul was. David Soul was, and
I got it wrong.
He's still alive.
He's still alive and kicking.
He was one of the top TV stars of the 1970s, and also here's an interesting fact: he was one of the top selling solo male artists, singers of the 1970s as well, because of his wonderful hits. Don't Give Up on Us, Baby, and Silver Lady, things like that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those tunes because those tunes kind of stick in your head, but they're kind of like a novelty songs, aren't they? Would you say?
It's interesting. Yeah, I would say so. I would say like I think if you've seen I tell you what, you didn't mention about David Soul, of course, being he's most famously from Starsky and Hutch, of course.
Yes, of course.
Which
Probably one of his biggest.
Disappeared into most young people probably don't know what that is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They might remember the Ben Stiller film, which of course they made fun of the music, the song "Don't Give Up on Us" as part of one of the comedy skits in that film, didn't they? Yeah, but actually the song "Silver Lady" is pretty good. I love Silver Lady.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely a brilliant tune. I think he's a brilliant guy as well.
Pop rock.
I think he's an absolute cool guy. I mean, regardless of people taking the mick out of him, but I think a lot of younger generations, and when they're making new films, like they always seem to take the mick out of the people who came before. Like, them are so much cooler and all the rest of it.
Starsky and Hutch, of course, had its fair share of comedy moments. But actually, in the 70s, it was pretty gritty, wasn't it?
Was pretty dark, yeah.
It was pretty gritty, really. There was, stuff about drugs and things in it. In fact, interesting enough, one of my childhood memories is of a thunderstorm, which actually took off most of the chimneys of the houses in the street I lived in.
Wow.
Yeah. And it happened during an episode of Starsky and Hutch.
Wow.
And just at the moment where somebody was going to throw a hand grenade, the hand grenade, somebody took the pin out of the hand grenade and threw this hand grenade, and then there was this massive explosion from lightning on our street, and all the electricity went off, and these chimneys got blown off, which is a bizarre thing that happened.
Wow.
There you go. There's a little story, an anecdote.
Absolutely love Starsky and Hutch. Absolutely coolest. I absolutely love Starsky and Hutch. What was the Italian guy called? What is it? Glacier?
Yes. John Paul Glazer.
Glazer, that's the one.
Yeah.
I actually bumped into him in London, in the Tate Modern. I was just like walking around. I was browsing around, looking at books, and I turned round and he was there. He was just standing, looking at books. I was like, wow, and I got like starstruck instantly because I had watched him as a small child, like as a small kid, and I wanted to speak to him, but I think it's just how he looks. He looks quite like he's a bit pissed off, but and I thought, and unfortunately, I mean, it was around that time, if not just before that, he unfortunately lost a lot of his family, his wife, I think his son, through to a blood transfusion gone wrong. And I thought, you know what it is. I'm just going to leave it because
best.
He was like, I was probably one of his biggest fans. I used to absolutely love him. I used to try and like dress up as him as a kid. I had do you know the white. The white cardigan, I had that in school, and I kind of already had the hair, so I was halfway there, But I thought, what it is, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to respect him and just admire him from afar, Yeah. So
it's fascinating because when we made the film with David Soul, it was they were just finishing. Or rather, when we first started to talk to them, to David Soul, he was making the Ben Stiller film. They did a little cameo in it.
Yeah.
So they made that Ben Stiller film. It was fascinating. We were with the producer and myself. We were on the phone to him, and he was with Philip Glazer.
Oh, really?
Together, which was a fascinating thing to have.
Yeah, of course. How did that come about, Rob? I mean, how did they come about that you made a film with David Soul?
Well, it was actually for they were making a series of pilot films, a test out film episode of a series, and we had this idea for kind of like weirdly like a series of folk tales, animated folk tales, but they were going to be introduced by like a storyteller. It's quite a straightforward thing, really. So we needed somebody to kind of narrate it and be the storyteller. Well, originally it was just going to be the narrator, actually. So it was his voice that I wanted, and people were amazed that in my list of me wish list of actors that I had David Soul at the top of it.
Oh, really?
Know?
Yeah.
And it was really because of things like Salem's Lot, which I thought was a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about Salem's Lot already, and weirdly, there's some real masterpieces in the idiom of TV movies. He's in another TV movie which I love, and Cliff, you like this. If you can probably search it out and find it.
Yeah.
There's a TV movie by Dick Lowry called the F.B.I Murders.
Wow.
Right. And that's it's like a true crime drama about this disastrous arrest by the FBI in the 70s sometime, I think, where they lost loads of men when they had this gunfight in the street with these two criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And the F.B.I Murders is a straightforward true crime TV movie about that. And it starred David Soul and Michael Gross, actually, as the villains. Sorry for jumping from one subject to another, but
No,
Michael Gross is in Tremors. You know Tremors?
Oh, the film. Yeah, Tremors, yeah.
Tremors. That's
The
Michael Gross.
horror movie Tremors.
And Ronnie Cox as well. Ronnie Cox, who's did loads of things like Total Recall, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's a great film as well, the F.B.I Murders. And the sequence with shootout in it it's one of my favourite shootouts in genre filmmaking, really. And I don't suppose it's on many greatest films lists, but it's worth looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
You can probably just watch the clip on YouTube, actually, of the fight itself, which is amazing. But again, and that always reminds us of Heat.
I was just going to say Heat because that was taken by the FBI, wasn't it? The fight scene. I think the FBI had it as a training video. The shootout scene in Heat.
But I think I might be digressing rather, just by saying, giving loads of kind of like references about what David Soul did. But he had this great sonorous voice. For some reason, I wanted an American voice. I'm quite like Americana,
Uh-huh.
And I thought it would work well with the animation, and it did actually. He read the narration out really. Well, what you do is you send you get in touch with the agent and you send the script and the hope that they're going to get to read it. And he read it and liked it. We sent it to a couple of people actually, and most of them liked it, but some of them weren't available.
Uh-huh.
But he was, and I really wanted him. And he had a small slot between, I think, doing that cameo in that movie and doing Jerry Springer the Opera. I don't know if you remember Jerry Springer the Opera.
I've never seen it, but I've heard of it, definitely.
It was it's probably something that's dated a bit because Jerry Springer's sort of disappeared into the history of television, hasn't he? But Jerry Springer the Opera was a very good satirical show. And David Soul played Jerry Springer in that for a period. In the recorded version of it, it's David Soul as well. So if you want to see it somewhere, he's in it, and he does a great job in it. So there was a slot where he had a gap, and he did our tiny little film up in the northeast of England. So that's how those kind of things happen.
Wow!
You've just got to. I quite believe in getting the right actor for the job.
Yeah, of course.
Associating yourself with names and things like that, it can be quite useful. Yeah. And
what was that film called, Robert? Was it called The Cauldron?
No, it was you're quite you're nearly there. It was called The Dark Lantern.
The Dark Lantern, yes.
The Dark Lantern, yes.
Yeah, of course.
It
So,
was a pilot for a shit show, but we just made the pilot.
have you got these on YouTube, or are you planning on getting some of them up?
I will at some point, but
Get them up on
actually,
YouTube.
one of the strange things about it is they're all on. Most of these were shot on a format called Beta SP, things like that,
Oh,
which is
yes.
the kind of the broadcast standard of about 20 years ago. And most of them are sort of sitting around on those tapes still, and need transferring from one thing to the other, and then digitising and all those kind of things. So there's not that many of them up there anywhere for people to see. That's probably one of the problems of making most of your films 20 years ago.
Yeah. You've got.
I bet you had difficulty when you had something like Whitehouse Road.
Whitehouse Road.
On probably, was it on U-matic or was it on Beta? It was probably on Beta to start with, wasn't it?
It was on DVC Pro.
Oh, was it? Oh, DVC Pro, yeah.
DVC Pro, absolutely loved those cameras, but if you put a battery in, they lasted for about 20 seconds. And I kind of remember being on a film shoot, and I put the battery in, and it lasted for about, I'd say about 5 minutes, and I've called Mike Gallen, and I says, "Oh, Mike, I've got a bit of a problem. We've started shooting, we're all here, the actors here, but the battery, there must be something wrong with the camera." He says, "Oh, how long did it last?" I says, "About 10 minutes." He went, "Oh, yeah, lasts about 10 minutes. I was like, "Oh, no." So, the joys of working with cameras and all the rest of it, but... Did
he have many backup batteries, or did he not go out? Did you just have the one?
I think we just had the one, but I'm just thinking, what did we do? Did we plug the power in? Must have plugged some kind of power in, because
plugged the power in.
We didn't want to use the power because of the big cable, and it kind of restricted where you see. So that's why I kind of needed the battery, but I got it done anyway. So something must have happened.
Well, it worked.
It worked, yeah.
It worked all right.
But while you were still teaching at Northumbria University, you were doing... You kind of took your eye away from animation in your spare time back to music. Is that right? To focus back on music.
Because, I would say so, possibly.
Because you said it was logistically easier.
Well, logistically for certain, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't take quite as long, for instance. It's not as expensive as making films. For instance, if you're interested in that kind of thing, I quite like using because I can make quite a bit of music. Some people, labour over one thing. I can probably do quite a bit. I can work quite fast, just like I work quite fast with animation, actually. Because I work quite fast, I can kind of sometimes working with filmmaker Ian Cottage, I would do the kind of like the playlist approach. So I would usually give them a set of pieces, tracks for them to choose from, or for them to try over different parts of the film, rather than taking the film and kind of composing a score for it. So there was like a musically related pieces that are kind of like cohesive and connected in some way, tonally, or with musical motifs in them or whatever. And then you can try different iterations of them, different kind of energies, different tones, different atmospheres. And you kind of get this playlist, and you would try a couple of different ones on and go, I like the end of that one, can you make that bit longer? Can you give us this bit of that one? I don't like that one gets too noisy there, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So you go backwards and forwards with it in this kind of constant dialogue, which is quite an interesting way of working, actually. But it helps if you've got time, and that you're not spending too much money on it, because that's probably could be quite expensive if it was costing a lot of money and you had like loads of musicians or whatever. But if you're doing it like a one-man band, it's doable,
Yeah, of course.
So that kind of works quite well. And again, I don't want to compare myself to David Lynch or anybody like that. No, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. But that kind of process actually is one of the ones that people use. For instance, Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti, who does most of the music for David Lynch, work in a similar way, in that he would give him kind of like a set of tracks that he could use over certain sequences, obviously following creative discussions and workshopping atmospheres and styles of music out to fit over certain things. So that's kind of like it is actually a way of working in the industry. So there you go.
Wow. And you say you were inspired by composer Harry Porch. Harry Porch?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yes, that's true. For many years, I was going to make a couple of films about him, but in the end, it's probably too close to just being a straight documentary. And there are plenty of straight documentaries about people out there. So instead, more like the spirit of somebody like Harry Porch is kind of animates my approach. I'll tell you a little bit about who he was. He was an American composer, mid-century, last century, 20th century, who kind of was what you might call an outsider. Outsiders are people who tend to operate outside of the establishment, in some way, on the peripheries or the margins of it, for whatever reason, through he kind of avoided the kind of the academic world of the show ring, as he called it, and kind of sat around the edges, almost destroying himself in a way.
Right.
in that he kind of like created his own instruments and used his own musical scales and things like this. Basically, the music he made was almost impossible for anybody else to play apart from him and his small band of musicians on instruments that he created himself.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he said I'm not a instrument maker. I'm a philosophical man who's been seduced into carpentry. And he said he liked, so he created his own instruments out of stuff. It started because of the American Depression, the Depression of the 1930s, where art should become an itinerant worker, riding the rails, what you might call a hobo, So actually he used to make music on things that he found, like a broken car horn or some glass jars from a radiation laboratory.
Wow.
And he used to make music on this. So he made this percussive music, which has influenced people like Tom Waits or David Thomas of Pere Ubu, all sorts of people. And of course, other avant-garde composers as well, like Steve Reich and people like that.
Oh, I love Steve Reich.
Porch, because the percussive stuff.
Yeah.
But Porch always was on the edges, an iconoclast, I think you might call him, involved in what you might call a kind of a heterodoxy, which was basically doing it the wrong way, outside, doing something different, not doing it the way that you would expect it to be done. And it was lo-fi, and it was visceral. And it liked to combine performance with the music as well. So I guess some of those things kind of like are things that have influenced what I do as well. When I make music, I usually do it in a lo-fi style, use broken instruments or toys to make the music with, things like that. Like a lot of my electronic stuff is basically toys, I was trying to see if I had hold of something, but I can't. What is it?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow,
There's a bit of piano.
Excellent.
It's a toy piano. But, so that's kind of, that's how things can influence you as well. Or you can just take on their approach as well, rather than the actual sound of the music,
Yeah.
So that's what that's about.
Could you I think I know what it is, but I didn't before we started this this interview. The term lo-fi. Could you explain what that is?
Well, I suppose it might mean quite a few different things. I guess some in terms of some musical genres, it's usually just about noisy, indistinctly recorded, basically recorded music. Mm-hmm. But I suppose it's the opposite of hi-fi, so it's low fidelity. It's not really that concerned about clarity or precision. It doesn't mind, or rather it might even positively quite like things like harmonic distortion and buzz, Mm-hmm. You might want to actually include the sound of an amplifier hiss or something like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And why would you do that? It's because you like texture and grain, things like that. Or you just simply don't like polished and clean sounds, or you in fact want to positively reject technical precision. That's what I would say it was.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. I was a bit confused to what the term actually meant. It kind of what you talk.
Of course, it still has to be clear. Uh-huh. You still have to be able to hear everything, but sometimes distortion or buzz or harmonic sounds can create a kind of an ambient atmosphere of granular texture in their own right.
It kind of reminds us of when I don't know if you've seen it, Rob, but I interviewed Noel McLaughlin like last year. I think I mentioned it, and we talked towards the end about I saw all these names run through my head. I can't remember them all, but could it be Lenoir? Oh, you see, when I put myself on the spot and I can't remember the guy's name, it'll come back to us. I think we'll move on because
was it an animator?
No, he was
an animated film.
They're both musicians.
I'll tell you what, you're not far off it. I know what you're talking about. Because if you were talking to Noel, he was probably talking about people like U2, wasn't he?
Yes.
So you're talking about Daniel Lanois.
That's the one. I was close.
Yeah, you were very close. It was right. In fact, I think you said the word Lanois.
Oh, right.
I didn't know what you meant, but now in the context, I know what you mean.
And then
he's a musician in his own right, but he's famous for being if not a producer, then a sound mixer or something with people like U2 and I think Bob Dylan, people like that as well.
Me and Noel were talking about him, and
are you thinking about Brian Eno?
Brian Eno, that's the one. So him and Lenoir.
I'm reading your mind.
I know. Him and Lenoir, they made an album, didn't they? Like a groundbreaking like space contextual album, and it was.
Well, Brian Eno, you'll know Brian Eno. Brian Eno began in. These are my little potted histories of things that you find interesting. Uh-huh. Brian Eno, of course, began in one of the best British art rock bands of all time, Roxy Music.
Roxy Music. Who's
Roxy Music with Brian Ferry from Shiny Row.
He's from Newcastle, isn't he? Yeah.
He's from Shiny Row.
Where's that? Shiny Row.
Shiny Row. I think it's North Durham way. Kind of way. I think it's that kind of what's down there now. But yeah, it began in that synth pioneer, and then became kind of like and then kind of probably most famously started to do more what they call ambient music. Music for airports.
That's the one.
Ambient music, which is kind of like almost like meditation or relaxation music.
Yeah, of course.
Soft synth textures. Again, the word texture keeps coming up here.
The musical choice of astronauts.
He probably became very famous for being a producer for. He made an album with David Byrne of Talking Heads as well.
Yes,
which kind of was one of the pioneering records for using sampling. My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, and then of course. produced people like Talking Heads and that band U2 that you would have talked to Noel about as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Atmospheric, textural, certainly fascinating. And when it comes to creative strategies, of course, you might remember talking about Eno and Peter Schmidt's oblique strategies. Do you remember them?
Oblique strategies.
Just a way of breaking out of creative inertia. If you're stuck on something, then he used this. Schmidt and Eno came up with this system of using cards to randomly find solutions. You know, that you pick a card at random and it would say, do this or do that. Called the oblique strategies. They're quite a famous kind of creative game, which many people have used, from Bowie to U2 and others.
Wow.
But yeah, and Eno himself, of course. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that. I mean, I was actually reading about Eno, and I didn't actually get the chance to tell Noel, but a lot of astronauts were asked while they're up in space, what kind of music do you like taking, or what kind of music do you like listening to? And all of them said country music. All of them. Country and Western. But there's a thread to that, because the Eno album, that with the space context, he says it's like a country album, because he's got the flatbed guitar, I don't know what you call it, like kind of Hawaiian
pedal steel.
Yeah.
Pedal steel guitar.
Yeah, and that's kind of like this country and western feel, you know. So it's kind of a kind of a mixed match of
what's there.
Like a mixed match of space and country.
I guess all the astronauts were. Most of those astronauts would have been good old
boys.
Cowboy types, anyway.
Yeah.
In the 1960s and 50s and
60s.
Yeah, you cutting out a little bit there. I missed you a little bit, but I think, yes, I know what you were talking about. I think those records, is that the Apollo records?
I'll keep on going. And then you made music for Spin on Channel 4. Rob, is that a French political drama?
No, it's not.
No.
That's one of the films I worked with Ian Cottage.
Oh, right, got you.
Yeah, Ian, Spin was a film Ian made a couple of years ago now for the Random Acts scheme on Channel 4.
Channel 4.
Which was a kind of a short 5-minute drama, a non-stop piece of music for that soundtrack as well. I think you can see that film online, actually. Here's an interesting thing. In it, there's a spinning top spinning. And just try recording the sound of a spinning top. It doesn't make any noise.
Oh, right.
So most of that film is somebody spinning this top, like that, and the top spinning around. And the music's supposed to sound like the sound of this top spinning.
Wow.
And if you actually spin a top, I'll let you try this in your own time.
All right, brilliant.
Spin it, and basically doesn't make any noise. It just goes.
Yeah.
If anything. So, the only way to make it sound like anything is to put it on a bit of beveled, like a bit of graded, textured glass to spin it. So all the spinning sounds of that it had to be put onto a kind of like this textural bit of glass in order to make the sound. Because it doesn't make a sound.
It doesn't make any sound, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sound at all. The spin-ing top. Yeah.
So what?
There's a little fact for anybody out there who wants to record spinning tops. Put them on a bit of textural bass.
I'm going to go home and do that. I'm going to go home and do that immediately.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So
recording sounds can be a lot of fun.
Are you currently working on a sci-fi Instagram web series called Karnak in Space?
Well, you could say so. I suppose you could, yes. You could say that. You could. It could be argued.
I've never heard of an Instagram web series. This sounds interesting.
Well, I haven't really got very far with it, but yeah, I made a film, or I started making a film a couple of years ago now, which kind of got it just didn't get to finish it properly, really, because of other commitments, really.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of material, which was really quite interesting. I had an actor. I had special effects. I had miniatures built for. It was basically an update of an Edwardian ghost detective story.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. But set in space. Yeah, in space.
In space, got you.
But yeah, so I've got in the character is called Karnaki. And he was in space. So that's why I called it Karnaki in space. But no, I'm still kind of working on that. But what I plan to do is to create these tiny little vignettes, like tiny little episodes of the story, of the world, of the experience of exploring this space environment.
Uh-huh.
And I thought a good place to put it is somewhere like Instagram, because I was interested in a series. I think it was called Unbound, and it was that was made at the time of David Bowie's Black Star record, and it was again micro episodes which were just posted on Instagram, which are like these tiny little music videos, really, but usually only about 30-40 seconds long, for the Instagram audience, really. And I thought it would be quite a nice place to put something like that, but I haven't really got into that yet. But
right.
It's certainly going to be an interesting way of exploring footage that perhaps hasn't made it into a traditional film, you know?
Yeah,
because sometimes you do an awful lot of work on something and it just doesn't come to fruition. It happens a lot in filmmaking. I'm sure you've come across that as well. You might have started something, but it hasn't been able to be finished, or you realise that time's passed and you need to turn it into something else.
Yeah.
And that's one way of doing it. But I'm interested in that story because I guess it's kind of like an updating of an obscure Edwardian detective, who are people who like that sort of thing, who like Sherlock Holmes and Edwardian detective fiction. Yeah. There's a lot of them out there.
Oh, of course.
We'll probably know somebody like Karnaki, who was one of the first kind of ghost detectives, you know, let's say it was like a version of Sherlock Holmes, but investigating kind of paranormal stuff, you know,
like kind of Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah. In fact, it was really there was, you know, after the success of something like Sherlock Holmes, you had many wannabes, you know, you had many copycats and all that. There was loads of copycat great detective stories came after Holmes. Not least people like Sexton Blake, you know, or John Silence, all these people. And Karnaki was one of them, really, written by a guy called William Hope Hodgson.
Yes.
Who was actually killed in the First World War, so that kind of brought it all to an end. And there's a large fandom for people like Karnaki stories, because there were only so many stories written before he was killed in the First World War. And fandoms often want to continue stories, you know, they want to keep the stories going. And you get people writing, you know, the next story, etc., or what would have happened if he'd gone and met this person or that person. The same happens with Sherlock Holmes, and the same is true of somebody like Karnaki. And there've been several kind of like books published of the further adventures and things like that. And I guess my little film about him being in space is just one of those reimaginings, I think.
Yeah, of course. Sounds really interesting. So, are you still going to investigate this? Pardon the pun.
I'm investigating it.
You're investigating it?
Yeah.
You're on the case?
Yeah, I'm investigating it. I'm on the case. Yeah, like Karnaki.
Like Karnaki.
I'm in there.
I mean,
yeah.
do let the cat out the bag, Rob, when you get it going. I mean, put it on Instagram.
It's quite good because we shot a lot of it with actually shot this. It's only my second film with an actor. My first actor being David Soul. The actor who was in actor who played Karnaki is a guy called Edwin Lee, who's a Newcastle artist.
Oh, all right. So is this kind of live action, Rob, or is it animation?
Yeah. It's live action.
Oh, it's live action, right? Got you.
Well, it's live action, but it's kind of like heavily manipulated and lo-fi. It's got like special effects in it. I built like miniatures and models of the place that he's investigating, and filmed it with blue screens and things like that, and put the actor into it, things like that. So it's kind of an animation in a way.
It does.
It's visual effects, but it's also lo-fi visual effects. It's meant to look old-fashioned and weird. You know, I love blue screen effects and miniatures and 80s films and things. I'm sure you do as well.
Oh, I do. Yes, it kind of reminds me. Sounds like it's probably nothing like it, but I think the BBC made a few years ago. They made Jack the Ripper. New evidence. Brand new evidence, never seen before evidence. Watch the documentary, and that was all recreated in blue screen, green screen, and it was reenacted, and it didn't really go anywhere. It's the case is like over 100 years old, but it kind of reminds us of that BBC reenactment of reopening the Jack the Ripper case, because they had done something a lot like what you're talking about, and it was quite interesting. It's just the story wasn't very good because it didn't really have any new evidence.
No, yeah, I know what you mean.
So there's the clanger. There's the clanger, So that leads us on to Black Lodge Whisper, because this totally went over my head because I kept seeing it on Instagram, and I'm going to throw all this stuff up on screen what we're talking about, but this kind of went over my head because I didn't realise it had anything to do with Twin Peaks.
Oh, well, it's strange. Yes, it's worth, because we're talking about, I suppose, when we're talking about the Karnaki and fandoms and people kind of like fan fiction and all that kind of stuff, people writing their own versions, continuing the story, what they sometimes called the circuit of expression of, the writers coming up with characters and then the fans. Encyclopedic knowledge of them and all these kind of things going round in circles. I was always interested. We talked about Twin Peaks right at the start, just as in passing, didn't we?
Yeah.
But there's a very Twin Peaks is a cult 90s mystery series.
Yes.
Which is kind of what you might call it's like a hybrid. It's like a cross between like comedy, mystery, and horror.
Yeah.
As well, police procedural. It's got everything going in it. It's got paranormal aspects in it. Most famously, the so-called Red Room or the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks is the kind of the paranormal elements of it, which excite audiences. And there's a famous kind of dream sequence in it where one of the characters whispers something in the ear of the main character. Laura Palmer whispers into Agent Dale Cooper's ear something, and we don't hear what that is. We don't hear it, and fans always go, "What did she say? What did she say?" This is the kind of thing that happens. Some people isolated what the actors were saying, which was just basically generic lines, really, and you can hear there's a few kind of like recordings of it online of what she was saying, but it's at such a low level you can't hear it, so you have to kind of make it up in a way. And I was fascinated in the way that people kind of put words into our mouth and things like that, like what she's saying this, she's definitely saying that, but you can't really hear it, but you can interpret it and you can come up with a line. So I came up with what I thought she was saying, and then I fed that line into a neural network which generates text by using artificial intelligence. and they're quite common. These are just common. These are like playground things that anybody can access online. Most of them are what they call GPT-2, GPT-3s. That's just the type of network that they are. Which, programmers have programmed a computer system to analyze massive swathes of text so that they know how to generate a certain type of set of words that make sense, or at least the hope that they make sense. Some of them are simpler than others. I quite like the simple ones, the GPT-2 level ones. But I put what I thought this character said into one of those, and then what came out of that, I then took that text and put it back in, so it kind of created this infinite loop, a kind of a reflection of that circuit of expression that I talked about a minute ago. But you get some really weird stuff. It's surreal. It's basically the same. It's the equivalent of using the surrealist techniques of the exquisite corpse. Basically you get random sort of conflations of words, though I'm convinced that you need a human to help it, and I help it by editing it and curating it, dropping something in, deciding that I didn't like that one, so you get rid of that. That's editing, or changing a line and putting it back in and seeing what happens. And that's kind of what that is. So it's kind of almost like a fan fiction based on that dream sequence from that film. It's like it's a whole timeline that's emerged through playing with artificial intelligence and neural networks at an arm's length from me as the person who's doing it. I'm not really doing it, the machine's doing it. But I'm curating it. And most recently, I did put that on. I did put it on Twitter for a bit, but of course, nobody's interested in that kind of thing. It's not really what Twitter's for. It's not really what it's for, is it? No. It's not what it's for. But actually, I decided that would be quite good to mix it up with music as well. So, most recently, I've been putting sequences from this kind of artificial intelligence story against little bits of music as well, and you get this sense of conflation, like you're turning something into something. You're given an inflection of it, adds meaning into it and heart, and it makes things that perhaps don't quite make sense on the surface seem to make sense. It makes it feel like it means something more when a certain word hits up against a certain chord or a sound effect. Then it seems to have meaning. And I've also been asking some of my SoundCloud type chums, musical friends, pen friends, it used to be called in the old days, I suppose, to contribute some music. Remember pen friends in the old days?
Pen pals.
Basically what the internet is now, isn't it? Yeah, pen pals, yeah.
Pen pals, yeah.
So some people have been...
pen friend sounds a bit ominous,
doesn't
doesn't it?
donating music. Hey, say that again?
Pen friend sounds a bit ominous.
Pen friend. Yeah. But so some people have been. I've had a couple of interesting contributions from people I know who've done some interesting music for it as well.
Yeah.
And they're probably the best ones. They're much better than the ones I did myself.
All right.
As ever. They're always much better when somebody else does it. But yeah, it's an interesting project. I think there's a lot of study could be done on using these tools, because most of the time the artificial intelligence, the AI, comes up with something pretty generic or bland or nonsensical.
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem to work by itself. It's surreal nonsense mostly. But if you kind of like just mold it a little bit, it's that word that you used earlier, you can kind of push it in a certain direction and you can get some things that you would never think of, but which actually work, and you can go down like a rabbit hole following it.
It just depends how deep you want to go.
It has atmosphere, and it has feeling, and it has a certain coherent quality to it, usually added by the human elements of sound, music, or just the editing. There you
Wow,
go.
fascinating. I mean, I'm going to go on Instagram and look at this in a totally different light now because it obviously, like I said, it went over my head. I didn't really connect the dots. I didn't connect the dots with it, but now you've enlightened us once again,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna reinvestigate. I'm gonna reinvestigate this, Robert. Pepsi would be proud. Oh, Rob, I'm going to use this.
Catch the wave. I can still see the X.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I was wondering what the noise was, but it's actually the rain outside, so it's quite apt.
Oh, it's raining.
So Rob, I'm going to test your knowledge now because we're talking about Twin Peaks. We both seem to be these big fans of Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And then, you know, self-proclaimed massive fan, expert. I'm gonna test your knowledge. What was the original title of Twin Peaks? Actually, I'm gonna rephrase it. What were the three titles? There was three titles that was going to be Twin Peaks.
I just know it was going to be called Northwest Passage to start with.
Oh, right. It was all.
That's what I know about.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, that's my final answer.
It was also going to be called North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Yeah, for some obscure reason. And it was also.
They don't go into North Dakota until the third series. But anyway.
And then
I'll let them off.
It was going to be called the Heartland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm dropping knowledge.
Yeah.
This is probably an easy one for you. How many different endings did they shoot? How many different killers did they shoot?
I've got no idea.
Oh, really?
I do know that. No, I've got no idea. But I do know that because at pilot stage, they didn't know whether or not they were going to have a series, so they had to wrap it up in the pilot. And in the pilot is where they shot the sequences with like Bob and Mike in the boiler room of the hospital or wherever it was, which then they reused as the famous sequences from the first kind of dream sequences in episode 3. I do know that was why that is, and again that shows you how creative things emerge as well, because they wrapped it up in the pilot, in the first pilot that they aired to the networks, and then of course they took that sequence out because they didn't want to wrap it up in the pilot after it went out, and they reused that material as the dream sequence, which is why it was so weird, I suppose. And that also actually is an approach that kept on going with Lynch, because the entire Mulholland Drive was going to be a TV show. Mulholland Drive. That was going to be a show as well, which of course then became a standalone movie. Which is, of course, why there's so many sequences in Mulholland Drive, which are kind of like non sequiturs, from the weird spectre appearing in the backyard to the hitman and all that kind of stuff that happens in Mulholland Drive. Is like obviously the start of stories for strands in a TV series. Twin Peaks was famously described by them as 70 little stories happening at once, which is kind of the plot strands of a 2-season TV show in the 90s. So that's an answer, but it's not your answer.
Wow.
But it was still a little bit of Twin Peaks fun,
What?
Just for Twin Peaks fans out there. Oh, mind you, of course, now we're talking about Twin Peaks, and if this appears on the internet and there's some people watch it who are Twin Peaks fans, they'll know more than us.
Oh,
so we'll
I'm
probably
sure.
got it all wrong anyway.
I'm sure.
But the fact of the matter is that it's all interesting material that adds resonance to stuff.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean,
go on, more questions.
You'll probably get this one easy, but what was the name of the follow-up to Twin Peaks?
What, the film or the third series?
This
is the
the film?
Because, of course, immediately it was followed by Fire Walk With Me.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking for.
Which, of course,
correct.
Of course, wasn't very well received at the time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
I don't think I liked it very much, to be honest. I wasn't a big fan of it myself either.
Right.
It was a little bit, it looks at the most unsavoury part of the Twin Peaks story, the terrible story of Laura Palmer before she died, which is extremely unpleasant, actually. But it still has some of the best. It still has some of the best sort of dream logic sequences in it, like the Philip Jeffries sequence, the David Bowie sequence in it, and of course the third series I think is often referred to as the Return. If you just want to, if you just want to add closure to that question.
Yeah. You'll get this one easy. What was the name of Laura Palmer's evil spirit?
Her evil spirit?
Yes.
Are you talking about Bob?
Bob, yes. Bob was the one I'm looking for.
Bob. Yes. Good old Bob.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. What was the name of the woman in the unsolved murder that inspired Twin Peaks?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I know there's loads of things that are there, but there's all sorts of stories that supposedly inspired it, from, the DB Cooper hijacking of the airplane and all that kind of thing.
Right.
There's all sorts of things that were there, but I don't know the name. I don't know the name of that unsolved murder. But it's not a true life crime drama, that's for sure.
Yeah, of course. So, but it was inspired by.
I got a bit annoyed with that question, Cliff. Didn't like that question.
Oh, you didn't like that question.
I got annoyed with it. You see,
it's it's just because it was. All right. It was just because it was inspired by an unsolved murder of a young girl, much the same as the fictional Laura Palmer, but yeah, it was. I thought.
By lots of course. Things for certain.
Of course, yeah.
Here we go. Oh no! I mean, you've run out of time. You don't want to hear this. No, don't forget it. No, I've always been interested in the Shaver mysteries. Oh, the Shaver mysteries. Yeah, you'll know about them.
The Shaver mysteries.
Yeah, these are sci-fi stories from the 1960s, published in like Amazing Stories magazine,
right,
by somebody called Ray Palmer. Which again, these are influences to the stories of Twin Peaks. Names are important to people like David Lynch and Mark Frost, and it's interesting that there's Leland Palmer and there's Ray Palmer, who was part of these mysterious stories about spirits that lived underground and all this kind of thing.
Right.
There's all sorts of fascinating little strands you can look into. I guess when you're talking about exciting fans, and this is something that I maybe talk to students about, there's got to be material there for you to find out about. There's got to be a wealth of material to excite you. So the more kind of like details and strands that you can say inspired you or were an influence on you, I think, or that you can reference, is another little rabbit hole for fans to go down.
Oh yeah, of course.
A bit like your story, yeah.
You're right. So I'm quite interested. I don't suppose you'll know, but what was the gesture that Laura Palmer made, and what did it mean by she's saying, "I see in 25 years"? I mean, this is not a trick question. I basically just don't know the answer to this, and I thought you might know.
Well, it's possibly because that's part of the paranormal aspects of
was it something
of the Red Room. Yeah. What's that?
Was it something like that, or She was doing something.
Oh, that gesture.
Oh yes,
Oh,
yes.
I know what you're talking about now. I understand what you're saying. Well, that's simply the kind of like that's simply the kind of motion or gesture that a magician's assistant might do. You know, you know when a magician's on stage and they're doing something like sawing somebody in half or opening up a vanishing cabinet, and they have a beautiful assistant in the olden days. Then quite often that assistant would stand there presenting it by pointing it. It's just it's just like a vignette of a person kind of saying, "Here you go. This is what's happening." It's presenting a magic trick. Actually, that I think.
Wow.
Or even an assistant on a game show who presents like a legend on a backboard would do that, wouldn't they? To look at this means watch this trick or see this thing. That's what that gesture means. And then the phrase itself is just it's about how time kind of doesn't mean anything in that space. It's a little bit like, you know, the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey as well, isn't it? You know, where that Keir Dullea ages and was reborn through some kind of quasi-mystical process. So is Cooper, who of course ages in that sequence as well. And most astoundingly of all, if that's a sentence, of course, 25 years later, they did in fact see each other again when they remade, or rather when they completed the series with Twin Peaks: The Return in 2007, 2018 or whatever it was, 2 years ago.
Right.
Roughly 25 years later. So there you go.
Wow.
Of course, they weren't to know that then.
No, of course.
It's almost like magic.
It's all a bit, I wouldn't say supernatural, but I mean things like this happen for like happy accidents. Have you noticed? Because I mean for years I've been taking like a camera around, and then, you know, like documentary style, I've worked a few jobs with, you know, taking shots, and something always seems to like oppose the complete opposite to filming. When I've got a camera in my hand, something good always seems to happen. And I actually call it, Rob, I call it because I had a game years ago with the Spectrum, and the game was called Gift of the Gods.
Yes.
And I've always had that like run of words running through my head from a kid as I've grown up, and then I always seem to get presented with these gifts. Like when I'm holding a camera, or I'm in the space where I should be taking photographs or documentary style, something always presents itself that will split second will never happen again in eternity. It won't happen.
But remember, you put yourself in that.
But you've got to be in that space.
Everything adds up. Everything ends up at that point because of what you're doing, because of the way that you're looking at the world. Yeah. Because you've decided to go out on that particular day with your camera or whatever. So yes, it does present itself, but it's because you're sensitive to your environment as well. Remember, you might remember a bit of a mantra that I used to say all the time when you were the student of mine, and that is, you know, creative people become sensitive to their environments and their experiences. Yeah. So, you know, the reason why these moments present themselves to you is because you're looking for them, for a starter. Some people just don't look for them. Yeah, you've got to be in that space. Some people aren't sensitive to them, and it's not paranormal, I don't think, but it's certainly about putting yourself in the right place. You know, the classic "you make your own luck" sort of thing. You know, you're prepared. You know what you're looking for. You're in the right place. You put yourself there, and eventually something will probably appear. Sometimes it won't. But when it does, those are the moments you remember as well, of course. But it's because you're sensitive to your environment and your experiences. I mean, you can record it.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that, definitely. Because something cool always seems to present itself, or someone will come up, and you know, it always seems to happen over the years that I get these obscure shots that that you would never. You'd never get walking around, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who talks like this, but it is great. It is absolutely great when it happens. Creators David Lynch and Mark Frost wrote a script called Venus Descending.
Yeah.
The actual script was about another female. Do you know who the female was that they were referring to?
No. But I know that Lynch has done loads of projects and about all sorts of stuff that haven't happened.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like a reference to the Marcel Duchamp painting. But go on, tell us, what is it?
Marilyn Monroe.
Oh yes, I thought that. Yes, yes. I think bizarrely I had Marilyn Monroe in my head then.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to do a project about her at some point, but
I think they're both were going to
happen now.
Yeah, no,
it'll never happen.
It'll never happen. Would you believe
it?
Text through Instagram, like over the years, we've always been, we've always tried to keep in touch. And then it's just I probably knew this when I was still at university, but it come to fruition that we're both huge 2000 AD fans.
Yes.
And and I just wanted to kind of go over this quickly because we're both avid fans. We've been collectors of like 2000 AD, and I've got a monstrous collection of 2000 ADs. I've been collecting over the years, and I've actually got some under the table. Do you want to come round the back and I'll show you the good stuff?
Yeah. Let's see it. Oh, what a plot.
So I've got. We're talking 1994. I've got Brigand Doom.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved him. Yeah. I've got Strontium Dog.
Oh, you're going back in time there a bit.
I'm going way back to 1987.
Yeah, 1987.
Yeah.
The year of the Max Headroom signal intrusion.
Oh, really? On a side note, there was a story in Strontium Dog where he went because he could flip back in time. He could go forward. He could go backwards, sideways. He actually went back to bring Adolf Hitler back in his time to put him on trial for war crimes. I thought that story absolutely blew my mind. Strontium Dog.
No, it's great. British comics were great.
Oh,
this is, of course, where we'll also show how much older I am than you. Because I started, obviously. Well, actually, I followed a comic called Star Lord. Yeah, which had things like Robusters and Strontium Dog in it, and then that merged with 2000 AD in the late 70s, and then I followed 2000 AD for 10 years or other until I outgrew it a little bit, perhaps you could say.
Yeah.
But so I guess I was the golden era of the late 70s and the early 80s, I suppose. My love of it. I did have other comics as well. Like I had, actually, strangely, I used to inherit older DC and Marvel comics from a cousin of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Marvel and DC comics from like late 60s.
Wow.
Bizarrely, that's the ones I read. And then of course there was all those terrible kind of Second World War comics in the 70s, like Warlord, Battle. I didn't much care for them really, but that's all that there was. Everything seemed to be about the Second World War in the 1970s. It was really weird.
Yeah.
Action Man was all Second World War, fighting the Nazis and things. And then, of course, along comes 2000 AD in like the late 70s, which was amazing. And it was so gritty and satirical, even for like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of got it, didn't we?
Wonderfully violent. You were asking about what was on me, what kind of posters we had on our walls as teenagers.
Oh, yes.
And I remember that I didn't have many posters, but I painted murals of Judge Dredd on my walls, and then I realised actually I painted over that one and painted Nemesis the Warlock over the top instead. because that was actually my favourite one. I love the writer Pat Mills. I love
Pat Mills, yes.
The Warlock and Slaying.
Slaying
ABT Warriors, those are my favourites.
Slaying the
And I
whole
also
god.
like Alan Moore, of course. I like Alan Moore's stuff, Halo Jones and DR and Quinch and things like that. These were my favourites. Things like Dread kind of like bubbled along as just the general kind of like noise of 2000 AD, but I like it. Look at this cover. What do you think of this cover? Look at that cover.
Oh, wow.
What do you think of that?
Is it?
Look at
Yeah.
that. Look at the quality of that.
Absolutely brilliant.
This is probably the first time I ever saw rimlit artwork,
Yeah.
with backlighting.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a cover by Brendan McCarthy there from the early days.
Star Lord.
Some of my favourite art was by him, actually. That's amazing.
That's
I don't
really...
know what, are you allowed to show that on, look at this one. I dug this one out the other day. Look at that colour, look at that spread. Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely
The
amazing.
Retreat. That's called The Retreat from Volgograd.
I mean...
And that robot there, look at him with his...
The pages, you just fall into them, you get submerged into the stories and the artwork. I'll tell you, Robert, one of my favourites was, well, obviously, Judge Anderson.
Yes,
PSI. But the thing is, right, there was a story where a satanic force came down to the mega city, and
yes.
The person had horns. It looked like the devil, and he's going to take over. There's no one could stop him apart from Judge Anderson, because
yes.
she went into his mind, and it nearly done her in, because she took all his horrible thoughts and his manipulation of the world, how he's going to turn the world. And that story went on for about a month. Just every week, just constantly reading, like, what's going to happen? Obviously, Strontium Dog. I'm getting to the good bits, but Judge Anderson.
Well, I was reading, strangely, I was reading, I got one of the Rebellion reprints, I've got all the progs, as they were called, but they're never in order. So you always get really annoyed when you're reading one. You want to get the next one. You go, what happened next? What happened next?
Yeah, and you get them mixed up.
But the reprints, of course, have it in. And of course, I was reading the Apocalypse War in Judge Dredd.
Oh yes.
Which which has nuclear destruction of the planet. It has one of the spreads is the planet blown in half.
Uh-huh.
And I was just remembering what it was like in the 80s to be terrified of nuclear annihilation constantly.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And no wonder we weren't terrified of it if you were reading in your comic book the destruction of the world between Meg City 1 and the East Meg South Block or whatever it was called.
Yeah, they all had their own blocks, didn't they?
Basically everybody dies. It's
so
dark.
Wow.
And there's like spreads of like the sky filled with nuclear bombs and things like that. And we thought, well, we'll never ever have to worry about that again, thankfully. Oh, wait a minute. Oh well.
I've got The Annual by Pat Mills, and Simon Bisley was one of my favourite artists. You must have heard of Simon Bisley.
Oh yes. He disappeared at the end of my kind of readership of it, because I stopped reading it in about 1980 something, when I was 16 or whatever. But yes, that's he's one of the great. He became one of the great artists.
Slaying the Horned God, beautifully illustrated by.
Is that the one with the shiny? It's like got shiny pages or matte pages.
This is
comic book nerd talk now.
Shiny.
Oh, you got the shiny. Oh, you can't get that anymore.
Really?
No. The next print's got matte pages.
I have actually got quite a rare one. I mean, I don't know how rare this is, but this was Heavy Metal Dread.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of my favourites. This was my go-to, for years. I was intensely drawn and stuff. But Heavy Metal Dread was just beautifully written. John Wagner and Alan Grant, and obviously illustrated by Simon Bisley. And there was a story in there about the Great Orsoli. and he was basically going through customs, and then Judge Dredd pulled him to one side because he didn't like overweight people, did he, Dredd? I mean, you wouldn't get away with this now. If an overweight person went by, he would say something derogatory and get them lose their temper, and then he would sometimes he would just kill them on the spot.
He's not a nice guy. He's not
a nice guy. And
it was never really about him.
The great Orsoli, they kept pulling lots of things in customs out of his butt.
Well, that sounds like a high class.
I mean,
high point.
It doesn't sound very exciting, but the artwork absolutely.
Let's call it satirical. That's what you call it.
Yeah, but
artwork's great.
The artwork's absolutely. The artist Simon Bisley yet again.
Oh, was it?
And then when Dredd's got to take the walk through Oz because Dredd gets old, and then he's got I got Tale of the Dead Man, where Dredd actually has to take the walk, the walk of death through Oz, and then that's where all judges go. That's correct, isn't it? And then oh, and then I just want to top this off because one of the stories that really caught me imagination was in Tale of a Dead Man, but it was when a young boy wrote a letter to Dredd. And I thought it was in a different story called Letter to America, but I must have got it wrong. But he basically, it starts off with him. Can you say that, Rob?
Yes.
Yeah,
I can.
He basically writes to Dredd saying like, why are the judges like this and why they're so mean, and I'm doing a college paper on it, and why can't you basically treat people with like respect, and why do you go on like this? But it was just a short letter to Dredd, and Dredd like started reading it, and it really caught his imagination about this young kid writing to him.
Oh yeah, well I think it's probably at its best when it's it was a fascinating comic because it was satirical, wasn't it? It used science fiction as a satire. Judge Dredd and his colleagues are all fascist. Muscle men, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
But the stories did all kinds of satire and different things. It talked about racism, talked about there was feminist stories, all sorts of things in there. Brilliant, and of course there were also just silly science fiction adventure stories as well.
Oh yes, and
but something like the Pat Mills stories were always filled with contemporary references and things like that to music and news stories and all that kind of stuff, and that seems to come through in those ones as well. And it was always fascinating. I was fascinated how there weren't any superheroes really. Well, not until you get somebody like Zenith, who kind of came in a bit later. But there were usually just ordinary people who were like extraordinary characters or had amazing technology. Strontium Dog's just got like a load of different types of guns and bombs, and Judge Dredd's gun does all sorts of different things, and his bike does all sorts of different things. But they're not superheroes. They don't fly.
They're just kind of definitely.
Yeah, they're just people.
It's so kind of futuristic.
I much prefer that than like Superman and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean definitely. I mean the bit.
I can't think of any. Actually, of the golden era that I'm talking about up until about mid '80s, there certainly weren't any superhero characters. They were all aliens or men with technology. And again, when a superhero did turn up, like Zenith, I don't know if you remember Zenith.
Zenith, yeah.
Then he was mixed up.
Yeah.
or it was mixed up with things like the Cthulhu mythos and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, always distinctive and
brilliant.
And influential to the way that we approach it. I just showed you that artwork there. that's from 1970. I was precisely 8 years old when I first saw that.
Wow.
And again, but that's why I wanted to draw, and I have made a career out of drawing, even as an animator.
Uh-huh.
I'll do some. I love drawing. I'll do more drawings. I drew all my films. If it wasn't for seeing something like, if it wasn't seeing something like that, I wouldn't know how to storyboard something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly how to create a sense of movement and depth and excitement, visual excitement. So there you go.
Oh,
people should look at stuff like this and respect it.
Go back and get your comics out. And then last story, it was Chopper Reed.
Yeah.
Chopper Reed, absolutely unbelievable. Going through the night, tagging like a graffiti artist, really. On a hoverboard, and obviously Dread hates that kind of stuff. But Big Sleep. So it was basically a deck collector going around Mega City 1, collecting all the debts. But it had a noir feel about it, like collecting these. He's got to get home to feed his rat, Yeah. Or did he have a rat in his pocket? But just things that stick in your head.
Look, my staples are rusty.
Oh wow!
Look at me rusty staples. Rusty staples.
Rusty staples for a gem of a comic.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's we're still talking about it like all these years later. Talking about 2018.
Exactly. Pat Mills is best known as one of the writers, but I think he was. I think at the start he was one of the editors as well. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm no comics history expert. He's just started up a new comic, I think, himself as well, which I haven't looked at recently. Right. But he's trying to do what he did in the early days. I don't know whether it works, but it's good to see that he's still trying it.
He's still, he's still doing it.
Comics called Space Warp, I think.
Right.
There you go. There we go. Comics news.
Comic news,
Only at Peep.
We're still
magazine.
talking comics.
Mm-hmm.
Hey kids.
1979.
Keep your 2000 AD comics.
Yeah.
So Rob, I'm going to round this off now with a little bit of history, because this is stuck in my head from when I was at university, and you done this thing when I was fiddling around with a camera. You jumped in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And then you made a couple of gestures, and I was kind of frozen, because you looked exactly like somebody else from a bygone age. And that was Stan Laurel.
Yeah.
The connection of Stan Laurel. Yeah. And it's like, your grandparents were blind musicians, knocker-uppers, no shields, soft shoe shuffle people. soft shoe people.
Yeah, soft shoe.
Soft shoe shuffle people.
The soft shoe shuffle.
What can you explain that? What is soft shoe shuffle? What is a soft shoe shuffle man, and what are knocker uppers? What were knocker uppers doing in North Shields?
Well, knocker uppers were people who got people up to go to work
within the theatre.
No, just anybody.
Oh, right.
Go down the mines or anything.
Oh, right, got you.
And people went around knocking on the windows like that.
Got you.
Yeah, and a soft shoe shuffle man is just somebody who does a specific dance in a music hall.
Right.
I don't know what that dance is, but it's tap dancing. Well, it's not tap dancing because it's soft, so it's the opposite of tap dancing. But yeah, stuff like that. But I guess you're just saying about where people come from, like just like your film Whitehouse Road is such a resonant film because it's a true story about where you come from, where your grandfather came from.
Yeah.
I suppose where you come from is important. I know, my films have always been about theatres and carnivalesque and puppets and things like that, or a bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
and I guess your question is about the history there. All I know is that when you look back at your family history, you see people like who've been performers and dancers or musicians and things in the past, and they are there.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about Stan Laurel, I think, specifically because you know that there's a distant relation in some way, which again I haven't pursued to get the actual facts of the matter. But we, on that side of the family, the Jefferson side, is from theatre people.
Yeah.
And of course, Laurel was from a theatre family as well. His father, A.J. Arthur Jefferson,
that's right,
ran a theatre in North Shields, which anybody watching this will know that. And it's fascinating. I was always fascinated how about something like Stan Laurel, how he was like a producer and writer as well of the work that he did. You know, with famous, iconic comedy double act in the early days of Hollywood. How he was the writer or one of the writers and producers. How Oliver Hardy, of course, was more like was an actor. I'm not little Oliver Hardy's great, but you know how they kind of work together.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how there's like just again how you kind of look at and realise why somebody is the way they are or whatever. I don't know what that really means as an end point of this chat we've been having, which has encompassed comics and Twin Peaks and music and artificial intelligence. But still, it's a point that's always worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because Stan Laurel, obviously his stage name, but his real name's Arthur Stanley Jefferson, and he was born in 1890 to 1965, I believe, and I think the connection's all there. And I think for the people looking now, for the people who are going to watch this, I mean, they're definitely going to see some kind of likeness there. That because when you done it at university, I mean, I got taken back with the likeness. I was like, whoa! And obviously, it's stuck in my head all these years. Connection there somewhere, and you know, I think it's a fascinating story about Stan Laurel, or
it is
Arthur Stanley Jefferson.
That's right. Well, strangely, I suppose I remember in the 90s I got invited to be to take part in a DNA study. It was part of that of a famous paternity case for you know, in America they were trying to find out what the kind of the family timelines of Thomas Jefferson, the President Thomas Jefferson.
All right.
You know. And they wanted me DNA to see if there was a relation. You know, they were looking for relations and things like that.
Got you.
But I often regret this. I decided to not give them my DNA because at the time I thought I don't want my DNA going to this commercial company as it was in the States, because I thought that in 200 years' time they might regenerate my body and make us a slave of the robot overlords of the future.
Yeah.
So I thought I better not give me DNA. So I never found out about that. But it's always interesting. You always go, wonder if that's where. What if there's any connection? But there isn't. So there's a story of DNA, and
DNA. I think that's where we're going to leave it, Robert Jefferson. And
on
that bombshell of DNA and being related to Stan Laurel, musician, auteur, filmmaker. Okay, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. See you, Rob.
Bye bye.
See you, pal. Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.
Bye.